Hello and welcome to the Wellness Connection podcast with Fiona Kane. I'm your host, Fiona Kane, and today I have a special guest. Her name is Simone Gisondi. Hi, Simone.
Hello, Fiona.
For those who don't know you, can you please give us an introduction into who you are?
Of course. I'm a health practitioner, holistic health practitioner. I'm an author. I wrote a book, a memoir to be exact, about my health journey. I had a stroke back in 2011, and I chronicle what happened and how I built my life back. And as it so happens, when I had the stroke, I was also going through divorce. So it's quite a bit of work that I chronicle in the book. I work
Yes.
with people now to empower them and teach them and educate them about what it takes to really have phenomenal health. Because
Mm,
I know I learned from the other side and coming to this side of real good health, and what journey to take, how to get there, what it
mm,
takes, the mindset, the physical aspect of it, all the aspects of things, especially nutrition, what to eat,
mm,
lifestyle, how to sleep, how much to sleep, what the
mm,
best conditions for sleep are, and everything in between.
mm. Great. Well, that's exactly why I wanted you here today because I really did want to hear about that story. People who listen to this podcast will know that I had a couple of small strokes in 1996, so a long, long time ago, and they were quite devastating for me, and they were relatively small. So I really love to hear your story and hear how you have overcome these hurdles.
Oh, absolutely, yes. So back in 2011, but just to preface it, I wanted to say that Um, back before the stroke itself, I was actually at the top of my game, my health game. I was a runner. My blood pressure was actually quite low. It was on the low side, not so much on the high side. So I didn't have absolutely any kind of risk factors or anything that would put me in that bracket that people would look at as like, oh, eventually she's probably going to. No, I was actually exemplary in my doctor's office. And those are the words verbatim that she used to actually use whenever I would do blood work. She would say, "You're the healthiest patient I have. My blood work was amazing. I was a runner. I was in the gym, had a beautiful family. Like I had a really great life, beautiful family, and great job. I was working for the government. It was really cushy. My coworkers were amazing. We were friends. So I had community. I was really everything was just great. However, my marriage was sort of breaking down. So I'm a type A personality. So I'm very driven, very ambitious, hardworking, a bit of a perfectionist. And so when my marriage kind of hit the rocks, I started to stress and I kind of diverted my attention, much like a lot of people. And I don't know if in your practice, if you work with people, um, a lot of people, this is what I found with my clients, a lot of people go towards escapism. And I did that too.
Definitely.
And oftentimes people go towards very destructive escapisms, such as alcohol, drugs, I don't know, sex addictions, gambling, things of that nature. What I did is I diverted all my attention to really perfecting my gym, really perfecting my health. I thought, I could do better. Let's just go little by little. Like let's tweak it a little bit to get to that better stage. I was running this much. I'm like, I'm just gonna run another 15 minutes. If I was running an 8 mile, I'm just gonna run an 8.5 mile. So whatever the case may be, I was just trying to tweak. So I was just kind of stacking on top of that. I actually I started looking into supplementation. Um, but I continued to go to the doctor, and every time I would do my regular visits, my blood work still looked amazing. However, my mindset started to sort of decimate as I was going through the hardship in my marriage with my husband. And the more that happened, the more I tried to up my game at the gym. So I became increasingly hard on myself, putting more stress on myself about, okay, well, I look great, but I don't have a six pack. Well, I want to get the six pack.
Mm.
Or
Yeah.
I'm
I think
not.
it's a controlling thing too, isn't it? It's
Yes,
like when we're
absolutely.
losing control somewhere else, we try and gain
Absolutely.
more control That's
That's right.
something we can control, and you could control the gym stuff at that point in time.
And I'll tell you, actually, in the gym, a lot of the people were sort of feeding that because I kept getting, "Oh my God, you look amazing. You're ready for a show." So it was like, "Oh, see, what I'm doing actually works." It was the confirmation and validation that
Yes.
what I was doing was actually, it had a positive outcome. So I'm like,
Mm,
"Okay, good. I'm on a good path here." And
yes.
but eventually, so I was 35 at the time, so very young, and about a few days shy of my 36th birthday, about 6 days to be exact, I actually I had the stroke. I collapsed in my kitchen. I got up. It was a regular Saturday morning. Saturday mornings, I was very ritualistic. That was another thing which speaks to what you said about control. So Saturday mornings were my heaviest workout of the week. I would wake up. I would make myself a really big, really healthy breakfast. I mean, I was so in tune with all the calories and the macronutrients. I knew I needed carbohydrates to be able to fuel the workout. I had everything weighed. I woke up, I started making myself the breakfast, and I had that same day, and this is all in my book. That same day, I had actually scheduled a party because it was Canadian Thanksgiving, living in Canada, of course. It's Canadian Thanksgiving, and I thought, you know what? Thanksgiving and my birthday are so close together. Let's just have a party. I'm going to have all my friends come, and we're going to just have a big bash, celebrate my birthday plus Thanksgiving. But because I was so obsessed with the gym, I thought, I'm not missing the gym. So I got up bright and early, which was my usual, and I started making my breakfast. At this point, my husband and I were already physically separated. So I stayed at the house with the kids because they were going to school nearby. And so I woke up, started making my breakfast, and I heard him come in because he was sort of trying to get, started on getting things done in the house for the party later on. We had about 20 people, so we had to put extra tables and chairs and so on and so forth. And I thought, okay, I'm just going to make my breakfast. I'm going to eat. I'm going to go to the gym. I'm going to pick up a couple of things on the way back home, like alcohol, a few bottles of wine. And then I'm going to, do the rest. I'm going to get the house ready, get myself ready, and we're going to party. And I collapsed in the kitchen. And it was just the most phenomenal thing because I don't want to lament about it. I don't want people to think, because I know oftentimes these uh, what are near catastrophic events, medical events, people look at them as such negative things, but I cannot say that about that. I mean, sure, it was, if you step away from it and you look at it through the lens of what society teaches you that stroke is, which is not a good thing by any stretch of anybody's imagination or by any definition, I actually became sort of suspended in time and space. It was actually the most extraordinary feeling and extraordinary experience that I've ever had up until that point. But as an aside, I actually had another near death experience when I was about 16. I nearly drowned, so I had sort of the same kind of thing. So of
Okay.
course, I was suspended in time and space. I was in this light, if that's what I can call it. And I just felt like this voice was sort of, um, I was absorbing this voice through everything that I was. It was just very difficult to explain. But I felt comfortable and safe and warm and happy. And in that moment, I kept thinking about how grotesque the other, where I had just come from was, because it was heavy and dense and full of hardships, and my marriage was breaking up and we were fighting, and there was so much competition at work, and you'd run into people on the road who would flip you the finger because you cut them off, and it was just such an ugly world that I had come from, and I was suspended in this extraordinary, amazing space and place that I had no idea, and I don't know how long I was there. um, and then I kind of came to, because I felt this pulling, because even though I was there, I kept thinking of my kids. And I knew that they were sort of, and my kids were young at the time. Um, and I knew that I had to come back. I just felt this pulling that I had to come back for them. So I kind of came back 2 in the kitchen. So I was in the kitchen on the floor. That's how I realized, though, that I had the stroke because I don't remember the actual falling. I just remember waking up, coming to.
Yeah.
And I had my kids. So I have 2 boys, my kids and, my husband. He was still my husband at the time. They were all sort of crouched on top of me. I was sort of on the floor, and I was looking at them, and they had these looks of confusion on their faces. They were looking at me, and they kept asking me something and I could not understand. The language they were speaking was incomprehensible to me. So fast forward, when I realized what had actually happened, it was because I actually lost my speech. So my ability to understand and communicate was actually the area of the brain that got damaged. So, but I was very lucid inside my mind. Like I was very aware of where I was. I sort of scanned the environment. I recognized them, but I couldn't understand what they were saying. And my mind was kind of racing, thinking, are they speaking Russian, Polish? What language is that? Because it was just not something I understood. And um, and then I kind of got up and I remember I had the world's worst headache. And I don't even do justice to the word when I say headache. I mean, it
Mm.
was the most painful pain that anybody could think of. And I had given
Yes.
birth twice. And if I could do a comparison, I would say that birth had been a walk in the park in comparison to this thing that I was feeling.
I haven't done birth, but I can relate to the pain. I can relate to the head pain. Mm.
Yes, it was just this, and in the book, I affectionately call it like this um, monster of sorts that was inside my head, and I kind of
Mm.
gave it a personality because I felt like it was just out to punish me. But
Mm.
I kind of got up, I kind of shook it off, and I started making my breakfast. The kids kind of scattered because they started, putting stuff together for the house. And
Mm.
um, I have my motorcycle license. I've always been fascinated with cars. I always say that in my next life, I want to be a race car driver. I absolutely love to drive. I love airplanes and cars. Um, so both my husband and I had our motorcycles and motorcycle licenses.
Mm.
So I jumped on my motorcycle, which was like I
Wow.
remember I put the helmet on and I felt like I just put my head in a vice. Jumped on the
Mm.
motorcycle, went to the gym, and I was shaky. Like I could not even function. Like my entire body, I mean, your central nervous system just took a huge
Mm.
blow. And but because I did not know, and this is what I want people to understand, and this is the story that I tell even my clients, it's not good to attach yourself to a diagnosis because that's when fear kicks in. So I did not know that that was a stroke. So to
Mm.
me, it was just like, oh, I kind of just fainted and I got up and I need to work out. And like, okay, I have a headache. Headaches happen all the time. It wasn't the first time I had a headache, but I thought I'm
Mm.
just like, I have to get on with the day, being the type A personality that I am. So I got started, got on the bike, got on the motorcycle, which was probably when I look back on it now, I'm like, what was I
Oh
thinking?
my god.
I
It's
mean,
just
it's a miracle from God that I did not kill myself or kill somebody else. I'll tell you that.
yes.
Never mind
Mm.
the stroke killing me, but the motorcycle.
Mm.
And I ended up at the gym, got to the gym, um, and I really want people to understand when the body goes through something of that significance, the entire like your entire body, all the systems sort of adjust to accommodate what just happened. I mean, your brain chemistry changes, your blood chemistry changes, your entire body's chemistry changes, your hormones, everything has to now accommodate what just happened. Of course, I did not know this at the time, but I got into the gym and I was so used to being able to. I mean, I was moving real heavy weight. I was people who work out. I was leg pressing about 500 pounds. I was lifting, like I was lifting super heavy. I was like curling for my 120 pounds. I was curling, 25, 30 pounds each arm. Like I was really serious about it. And I could not even do a fraction of that. Like I remember I picked up a 5 pound dumbbell to do I mean, initially I picked up dumbbells that were sort of in line with what I was used to lifting, and I kept like kind of scaling back because I'm like, oh my God, I can't do this. I can't do the 10. I can't do the 15. I can't. So I kind of scaled back the weight. And I remember I picked up 5 pounds and I could not curl it. I nearly broke my legs when I got on the leg press machine and I tried to warm up, and the whole thing came crashing down towards me because I literally had no strength whatsoever. Um, so it defies logic that I was able to balance a 450-pound machine between my legs
Mm,
while riding it. But the beauty of it is that it's very self-propelling when you start it. Once it
mm,
starts to go, and it's all just you kind of switch the flick of a wrist and it goes.
mm,
But at lights, I had to sort of stand and balance it between my legs, and
mm,
so it was a huge miracle that nothing happened. So I got back.
mm,
I just abandoned the gym, very disappointed in myself. Very. I thought, oh my God, I cannot even eat tonight because I'm not even like expending any calories, and I'm going to be eating such a rich dinner, and I'm going to be drinking
mm,
calories from the alcohol. I was used to understanding how calories work and how you can
mm,
assign them to certain days. Like I always say, even to this day, I say I got to earn my meals. So I kind of work
mm,
out in line with being able to not, go into caloric, like not to say that I want to stay in caloric deficit, but I don't want to go in excess either.
mm,
It has to be balanced. But yeah, I went back home. I
mm,
started cleaning up, and I was battling through this headache that like I felt like I had 15 screwdrivers like jammed in my head and people were turning them slow. It was so painful. In fact, I
mm.
don't have much of a recollection of that day. I just have like fragments of it that I
Yeah,
recall.
when you said that you didn't recognize language, did
Yes.
it like straight away? But did you later on, like when you went to the gym or when you came back home,
Well,
were you hearing people?
I didn't speak to anybody at the gym because I was just used to sort of, I would
Okay.
scan my thing, get in. I had my music on. And that was the case even when I was riding. And oftentimes when I was riding the motorcycle, I would have music in my ears.
Yeah.
Well, the music I would recognize because it was melodic. But
Yeah.
I remember I did make a pit stop at my local coffee shop, and I had my typical coffee and all of that. And
Mm,
I remember I did not, I wasn't able to string the sentence together to place my order.
mm,
And I kept like praying inside myself. I kept saying, um, okay, mind, like I would talk to myself, to my higher
mm,
self. I would say, okay, give me the proper words to make sure that I make sense. Because people, like when I placed
mm,
this order for my coffee, the lady kind of looked at me and said, pardon me? Like,
mm,
excuse me? And I'm like, oh my God, I am not like I intuitively knew that the sentence I would put together did not make any sense because the words were not
mm,
sequentially where they needed to be. So if
mm.
I was to say, how are you? I would say, are you how? Like the
Okay.
sentence just didn't make sense in proper speaking.
It's really interesting actually, as you saying that you're a type A personality, that you have this massive thing happening in your body, and your response to the deficits that are happening are, I've got to try harder, I've got to do harder, or what's wrong with me, or but they're very judgmental kind of it's just surprising to me that you didn't have alarm, like different kind of alarm bells going off. You had the alarm bells for, oh, I'm not good enough, or I should try harder, or whatever, but you didn't have the alarm bells for, this isn't right, I need to get attention.
So
It's just
as
interesting.
background, I should say, so I come from a brutally communist country. I was born and raised Eastern
Yes.
Bloc, Russian communism. There
Mm,
was no uh, like we did not have the idea of showing love or sympathy or empathy or any of those
yeah.
things just did not exist in our world.
Yeah.
Um, any tie to church or spirituality non-existent. We had to
Yeah.
recite things for the dictator that we had at the helm of
Mm.
the country. It was sort of
So
um, like Hunger Games style. Like we had rationed food, rationed electricity, rationed water. So it was basically do or die. So I had that
yeah.
mentality. I grew up with that mentality that you just got to
Yeah.
do what it takes, and
Yeah.
you do
What's
not.
wrong with you? Just get up, keep going. Yeah.
That's right.
That
You
sort
don't
of.
attach feelings to it. Nobody cries.
Mhm.
You just get
Yeah.
up and you keep going. Like you do what it
No
takes.
weakness.
That's right.
No
No
weakness.
weakness. Exactly. That actually captures it
Mm.
really well. I'm glad you
Mm,
said that, Fiona, because that's what like I actually dislike weakness in people for the most part, and I would never, ever accept it from myself, ever.
mm.
Um,
Yes.
and I still have remnants of that. I'm actually that's so deeply ingrained in me because of how I grew up, and that
Mm,
was through my formative years back in my country. And
mm.
I was born in Romania, born and raised in Romania,
Okay.
and so yeah, so that day I was just like, okay, we got to get this party done. Like, I mean,
Mm,
I knew, despite the fact, and I had like my mind kept saying like, cancel the party, cancel the party, and I was like, shut up, we're doing this. Like, I had these
mm.
conversations within myself, like, we are doing this. I committed to people. I cannot let them down.
Yeah.
How do I go and call people and cancel this party at the 11th hour? It's unheard of.
Mm,
No, I would never do that.
mm.
So I kind of pushed through. I got myself ready, and I wanted to look really good because I knew that my ex-husband, well, he wasn't really my ex yet, but he was there and we were sort of in the process of breaking up. I'm like, oh yeah, let me
Mm.
show him what he's gonna miss out on. So I wanted
Yes.
to look really good. And I remember, yes, like my my friends were there, so I have fragments. I just remember I drank a lot, and I had this one friend when she walked in through the door, she stands out. Her name's Anita, and she said she walked in and she's like, "Girl, you look like shit." I mean, we had very open, like our relationship was such that we could say anything to each other,
Yeah.
and I'm thinking to myself, I'm like, don't say that to me. Would you know how much work I put into looking like this? I mean, I went
Yes.
out of my way to go, the extra mile. And
Yes.
then she said, "You probably need," and I couldn't even think of what it was. And it was the word massage, which would just not come to me. And
Okay.
that sort of happened, later on too, because even in the hospital, I ended up with the doctors were always trying to get me to say words. So I had speech aphasia. That's what it's called. Um, so I did the party. The party happened. Then the next day, because it was like Thanksgiving weekend in Canada, I had I had more parties to go to. I had to go to my
Mm.
brother's house. I
Okay.
got back on the motorcycle after I drank the night before. I slept in, got up in the morning, attempted to go back
So
to the gym.
I'm wondering, was the language thing less noticeable because English isn't your first language? And so it's not that unusual to hear someone structure a sentence a little bit differently if that's not their
No,
first language?
I'll tell you. Actually, I was like numbers were never my thing. I always liked to
Mm,
write. Even when I was in high school, I had teachers that were saying, "Hey, you should write. You're really good."
mm,
So I'm really um, like I don't want to use any derogatory terms, but I'm like anal about language, about grammar,
mm.
about punctuation, all of those things. So I was
Okay.
like, there was no, if the sentence wasn't right, I was like, oh, that's not right, and it had to
Yes.
be right. So I
Mm,
did not accept that for myself. And I knew when I would like mess up, like I intuitively
mm,
knew, I'm like, oh, that's not good. That does not sound right. But I went to my brother's house on my motorcycle again. I went and I picked up a bottle of wine, took it to his house so that,
mm,
I would not walk in empty handed.
mm,
Did our thing there, came home just absolutely obliterated with the pain.
mm,
Then had another party. And then the following day, my friend, one of my friends, came. We had agreed, excuse me, that she would help me clean up after the big party that I had had. She had been at the party.
mm,
And this was now, the kids were at school. It was Tuesday morning. We had had a long weekend. And I was like, I mean, and so much, my head was pounding. And I kept thinking, I'm like, oh, of course it's going to pound. Like, I mean, I drank, I didn't go to
mm,
the gym. I'm totally off my game. Of course I'm going to have a
mm,
headache. And I hadn't hydrated properly, did not drink water to the same level that I drank alcohol. So I'm like, I'm
mm.
totally dehydrated. This is so normal to have a
Yes.
headache. And um, so yeah, my friend came to help me clean up the house. I mean, we had like because I was alone in the house now. My husband was not living with me anymore, so I needed help.
Mm,
And I I remember she came that morning and I was so out of it that I could not even, like, I couldn't even stand at this point anymore. I was like, I kept sitting down. She walked in and I'm like, why are you here? And she was so bubbly and, blonde girl with
Mm,
bouncy blonde hair. She was, she's like, yeah, we agree that I'm going to help you clean up. Like, what's up? What's going on? And
mm,
then she had to go because she had forgotten her cell phone in the car. And I remember I'm like, okay, she's in the car. I'm going to get started on cleaning because we agreed that we're going to
mm,
put the glasses away and all that stuff. And then everything went black. So, like,
mm,
I collapsed and then I woke up. I was in the resuscitation room in the hospital.
mm,
And I remember they had cut my clothes and they had the male doctor had this light shining in my light and I remember in my eye and I remember him saying, it's a stroke, get her to CT stat. So they could
okay.
see probably what had happened. And so I don't know if that was a second stroke. I don't know if the stroke happened, like I'm assuming that it happened initially and then this was a secondary one. I don't know. But
Yeah, or if it was the other one evolving slowly or
that's
yeah, I don't.
exactly.
Mm,
And then, they admitted me. I was in the hospital for a whole bunch of time. Obviously, I spent my birthday there.
mm,
Um, they ran so many tests. I mean, because I had no risk factors. I mean, I was young, very fit. They ran my
mm,
blood, I don't know how many times. They had me
yes.
on IVs, of course.
Mm,
And then they did Doppler. They did it like a whole MRIs, CT scans, unit PET scans,
mm,
you name it, I did it.
yep.
And but they still couldn't tell me why I had had the stroke. Like even to
Mm,
this day, like the medical industry never told me why I had the stroke. Of course, through my own
mm,
research, I kind of came to see why it happened, and I understood it from a physiological perspective as well as a spiritual perspective that
mm,
this was meant to be, and so it is. That's
yes.
why I don't believe that um, the pursuit of physical health is going to give you overall perfect health. I mean, you really have to have your mind straight and
Yeah,
you really
they
have to
go
be.
together, don't they? You can't really do one without the other.
That's right. They are so in
Mm,
like they're all interwoven together. And if one is out of balance, you are your weakest link. So if one is weak,
yeah.
then it'll take down the rest. That's just fact. Much like
Mm,
how it was for me, because they kept saying, like, oh my God, we don't know. She's a young, fit, 36-year-old woman. And
mm,
but so I was actually pretty okay at that point. If I look back, I started really declining when they put me on medications. Like, I mean,
mm,
significantly. I spiraled out. They put me, of course, on the typical protocol that they give to everybody.
mm,
And at that time, for the most part, people who had strokes were typically hypertensive, so they had high blood pressure,
mm,
older, heavier, so they had risk factors like obesity and things of that nature, hypertension, which I didn't
mm.
have. In fact, my even to this day, my blood pressure is still on the low side. I'm never like a
Yeah,
perfect
usually
one.
it's that whole metabolic disease profile, but it doesn't
Yes,
sound like you fit that in any way.
no. Um, so I've never actually hit a perfect 120 over 80. I'm still hovering at like 107 over 72. Like it's still on the low end.
Yeah, same
Um,
here. I've always been on the low end with my blood pressure as well. Mm,
yeah. So, and then of course I kind of started wondering, well, so why are you guys putting me on the same stuff that you're putting all these other people who have all of these risk factors? Like they check every box and I don't.
mm,
So I started questioning, and of course, I don't know how it is in Australia where you are, but here in Canada, you do not question the medical community. You do not question doctors, even though I
mm,
do question. And they did not provide me with any answers. So one
mm,
day, I was in the hospital. I had like my family was coming to visit me, my friends, and I was terrified because my husband's mother had died of a stroke.
mm,
And I was there when she died. I mean, like we
mm,
both were obviously. And so I was like, I mean, my mind was taunting me. My mind kept
mm,
telling me like, "Oh, hospital is where people die. There's a morgue here. You're with dead people here." And truthfully, because I had so much time in the hospital, I'm like, it's actually kind of true. Because like, I mean, look at this environment. I could not sleep because
mm,
there's lights were always on, constant beeping machines. They were calling code red, pink, blue, black, and every other color in between over the PA
mm.
system. I had the nurses, God bless them. My brother's girlfriend is a nurse and she's wonderful. So I really don't want to, be saying anything that's negative about them because they do most of the work. Like the doctors do a fraction of the work. But I have
Yes.
this nurse, she kept coming to check in on me every, you know, half hour or so. She would change my IV bag and
Yeah.
um,
And with mine as well, like because they check your INR levels every 4 hours. So they come in and do your bloods every 4 hours to
right,
check your INR, just to check your clotting factors. So they'll possibly were doing that as well. So they're just constantly checking to see what level of clotting is
that's right.
going on. And so even if
And
you,
all the other vitals too, blood pressure, heart
yeah,
rate, all of that good stuff. Yeah, of course.
yeah, yeah. So they're really poking and prodding at you pretty much constantly, which like
Yes,
I understand, like you were saying, I get why they're doing that, and I get that that's part of it. And I'm really glad that we've got the option of going in and if in an emergency situation, getting help and getting diagnosis and stuff. I personally found though that ultimately my experience longer term, especially with the medical profession, was just quite disempowering. It's like this has happened and there's
I
nothing you can
agree.
do about it, and we don't know why. And you take all these medications, and we'll see how we go, but no explanation for why I should take the medication,
That's
or
right.
like you said, like is it not just is this the medication that we just give to everybody, but is this the medication that's right for you? And are the side effects worse? And all that kind of stuff. There was none of that. And when I tried to explore other options for myself, I was kind of like, oh, you can't do that. That's that can't do that natural stuff, whatever.
Oh
So
yeah.
I actually just found it long term. I found the medical profession quite disempowering,
Yes.
and to empower myself, I had to sort of go and learn some other things. So that they have their place, but it can be really challenging when something like that happens, because they do really keep you, in my experience, in quite a negative and disempowered place ultimately.
I think that in events like these, acute events, I think it's very important, and I tell my clients this too. I highly advise go to a hospital as soon as you can, so that they
Mm,
can take care of you. But then take your
absolutely.
power back and sort of forge your own path on how you're going to
Mm,
heal, because you yourself know your body best.
yes.
You intuitively feel what you need. Like more
Mm,
than anything, I remember when I was in the hospital, I wanted sunshine and fresh air so
mm,
badly. And I was stuck
yes.
in this room with no windows and I had
Mm,
no fresh air. It was obviously this recycled air that was coming through the vents and they just wouldn't let me leave. And one night, I should say, because it was at night, I yanked out my IV.
mm,
um, they told me, you're not clear to leave. You're like, it's against medical advice. And I said,
mm,
no problem. And I called my ex-husband. I called my husband and I said, can you please come get me?
mm,
And he came and he got me around midnight and I ran away from the hospital. Like, I mean, they probably announced it code white for me because I was a
mm,
missing patient. And they probably realized at the end because my room was towards the elevator, so I kind of snuck out. Nobody really saw me. I wasn't in a high
yes.
traffic area. And then I really got on this path of I really wanted to see exactly what it takes to heal. I started doing research. I was obviously on disability at home because I was not well, and I
Mm,
had like the luxury of time to do research. And when I researched and I saw just how much there is out there, I mean, I was looking at people that had healed from horrible things, like way worse than what I
mm,
had gone through, cancer, stage 4 cancers. And I'm like, oh
mm,
my God, if those people could do it, and to this day, I believe this is my health motto. If somebody, even if there's one person, let's say there's a million people and 999,999 of them die, but one person survived, I will look to that person as the example. And I'm like, okay, if that person did it, I could do it.
mm,
So there were so many examples of people that had cured and gotten themselves back from death's door. And I
mm,
thought, well, you know what? If those people could do it, I could do it.
mm,
Then I went back to school. shortly thereafter, I went and I studied nutrition, holistic nutrition, because I really wanted to see. And then it was a very eye opening thing because it taught me how food interfaces with your body, the
Mm,
biochemistry, the macronutrients, what raw material the body uses to, put together what it needs to strengthen the
mm,
systems, immune system, the brain chemistry, hormones, and
mm,
such. And then I went to the United States and I studied regenerative detoxification. And I really wanted to do that because I wanted to regenerate my brain. I really wanted to regenerate my brain. I really wanted to get my speech back to 100%.
mm,
So I went and I studied in the US and I came back. My dad actually got diagnosed with cancer. So
mm,
then I saw it. I'm like, okay, perfect. I mean, I had already had the foundation. Then I went and I studied holistic cancer so that I could help him. I had already
mm,
seen just how tremendous of a change it was for me once I changed my diet. And of course, I mean, I
mm,
don't want to not say anything about the lifestyle. I scaled way back from the craziness of what I was doing at the gym.
mm,
And then once I got myself back on track, I said, you know what? Now I can actually go back with a smarter me would go back. And
mm,
I actually entered two fitness competitions and won. Um,
mm,
And then I settled into what I now know exactly what it takes. I mean, I understand so much more about blood sugar and how important that is, what really causes what, like, ailments people are afflicted with, cancer, what
mm,
it takes to get to that level. And also because I was sort of in that realm already, even from a spiritual perspective. And from an
mm.
emotional perspective, like being at peace and having community and having good relationships is actually conducive to health. So people who
Yes.
are angry, or people who hold grudges, or people who are constantly in a negative state of mind where they see the
Mm,
negative aspect of things. But like I said, for me, uh, whenever if there's one small, tiny, minute thing of positivity out in the world and the rest is negative, I will
mm,
zone in on that to the exclusion of everything else. And I remember I told myself, like, I'm going to get back to 100%. Like, I am. It wasn't like I'm going to try, or
yes.
I'm going to see if what it takes. Like, it was not like that. It was like the only
Yeah.
outcome, the only
You knew
possible
that that's what you were going to
is the
do.
one that I want. And there's nothing else
Yeah.
that can even happen. Like, it wasn't even remotely a possibility. So
It
that,
sounds to me like also what you're telling me, besides that absolutely laser focus that you had and that absolute belief that you had, which probably tells us a lot about your personality as well. But
absolutely.
the other thing that you were saying is really, it sounds like you just started to tune in and you just started to listen to your body a lot more and kind of just tune into your body, your environment, everything, because you were talking about the relationships and or the whether it be the attitude or the voice in your head, or whether it be the people around you, or whether it be what you're eating or going to the gym or whatever it was. It just sounds like you developed that sort of you started listening and paying attention and
Of course.
supporting yourself and nourishing yourself rather than kind of just punishing yourself and and not and like full steam ahead, not listening, not paying attention, which is what you were doing before, it sounds like. So that's does that make sense to you? Does that can you relate to
No,
that?
absolutely. And even just, for example, the energy and frequency of foods. Um,
Mm,
how do they interface with your body? And I mean, I know
mm,
that even in the fitness and bodybuilding industry, in the health industry out there, where the gym demographic, they believe that a calorie is a calorie. So if you're going to eat some, a donut, it's okay. But if you look
mm,
at the frequency of the foods that you eat, um,
mm,
and what they provide your body with, is it like a debit or a credit?
mm,
Does it take away from your health or does it add to your health? But oftentimes people think that, like, if you meet your calories, but if you're going to get, let's say, 1,000 calories from a meal from McDonald's versus 1,000 calories from a home cooked meal, you have to look at the factors. Is it a meal that's put together by an underpaid, disgruntled individual who is a stranger to you, Or is it a home
mm,
cooked meal that's made by your mom that loves you and wants nothing but the best for you and puts all of her love and work into it? Those
mm,
are, they interact with your body drastically different. Um,
mm.
and your
Yeah,
body
yeah,
extracts from that in accordance.
definitely. There was there's two aspects to that. One, it makes me think of that film, like I think it was Like Water for Chocolate. I don't know if you ever saw that film. I
I
think it
did,
was
yes.
Spanish film or something, but essentially, I've got this bug flying around in my face. There's this where when she cried into the food, everyone cried when they ate the food, and when she was putting love into the food. So one side of it is the energy that you were just talking about, but the other side you were talking about there as well is there was a cardiologist once at a seminar I went to, and he described heart disease as a postprandial event. And what he meant by that is the assault happens to your body post eating. So after you eat a meal, depending on what you've eaten, either you've got sort of, you're absorbing lovely nutrients and it's, reducing inflammation and adding to function, or your body's gone into some sort of, inflammation immune cascade where it's sort of battling to deal with whatever, and your poor liver's trying to recognize what these chemicals are or whatever. So it really is. It's not just about the calories; it's actually about the how much it puts the body through when you eat that meal. And if you're constantly putting your body through, before my stroke, I most of my life I had been very addicted to sugar and very high carb, high sugar, junk foody kind of diet. That had been a lot of my life, and I'm quite sure that that was part of what led to me ending up having that stroke. Well, I had a couple of them, but I wasn't aware until I had the second one, that I'd had the first one. So I sometimes do miss things as well. So I get it. So there's no judgment in me saying, what? You weren't really missing things. It was more that you were just, your personality says you're just going to keep on going. But yeah, so, and what I found too is I don't know that there's not necessarily one diet or one right way, but I think that in my opinion anyway, there's the way that works for you. And I feel like if you approach it from a place where you're nourishing yourself and you're tuning in and paying attention, I think if we start from that place, that like start there, and then yes, add in the right nutrition and the exercise or whatever. But I feel like if you start there, then you're more likely to do the right thing for you, which might not be what works for somebody else, but it is what works for you.
A lot of people, I mean, even the medical industry, at the time when I was obviously in the hospital, the intent
Mm,
was for them to um, take the power, so basically external power outside of me, and
mm,
onto them to heal me.
mm.
That's not how it works.
Yes.
The power is
Yeah.
always with you, which is why it's important that what you put inside of you is going to
Mm,
express either health or illness.
mm,
Um, and I tell people another important thing from a mental aspect or an emotional aspect: do not identify with that disease. And
mm,
'cause a lot of times people are like, "Oh, you're a stroke survivor." I'm like, "No, no, no. That is something that
mm.
happened to me. It's not me, and I did not survive it. It's just an event. Just like
Yes.
I gave birth. I can't say I
Yeah.
survived giving birth. I mean, it was
You're a birth
painful.
survivor.
It's a huge event. I mean, the
Yes,
body
yeah,
goes through so much, but
yeah,
yeah. So it's important how you look at it, and even how you look at the foods that you eat and what they do and how they interface with your body. And these are the
yeah,
type of things that I discuss with my clients, just to give them a different aspect of looking at things rather than
mm,
accepting the status quo,
yeah.
which oftentimes is obsolete.
I think it's very important too, because I know that we can get caught up in the victim place, and I know I certainly was in that for far too long. And I think, and it's okay, it's okay to feel like, it's okay to have your poor me moment.
Hmm.
That's fine. You can have it, but if you stay in that, then that's really problematic for you. But the other thing is too that just in today's society. and it's a whole other topic. There's a whole other podcast. But today's society, we're very rewarded for being in the victim mode, and staying in that poor me mode and identifying with the thing rather than saying, yes, I'm a person who's had a stroke. I'm a stroke survivor, or I'm a person who sometimes has anxiety, or deals with anxiety. It's like, oh, I'm an anxious person, or whatever. We we use a lot of the language in our society now that where we are labeling ourselves of the
Yeah, like
conditions or the
when it comes
issues
to
or whatever.
anxiety, people say, I'm
Mm.
anxious. I'm a
Yes.
smoker. Like, do not say
Yes.
I am. Do not tie it to your identity, because then your mind takes it
Yes.
as like, well, this is what you are. Why would you change? You don't want to change who you are. Like
Exactly. If it's who you are,
it's
then
being
it's pretty
unhuman.
much impossible to change it.
Yeah.
Whereas if it's an experience or a behavior or an event, or, there are things that you can do something about, but you can't do it, you necessarily do anything about who you are. So, yeah, I think it's just really important to emphasize that.
Yeah, what happens outside of you is something that happens, and it's like something, it's an event outside. The stroke was an event outside, but the identity stays with you for life. So,
Yeah.
because it's who you are, it's who you've always been. So, you don't want to
Yeah.
put that onto your identity, because in your mind says, well, this is who you are, this is who you will always be. So, you'll stay
Mm.
tied to that disease. You'll stay tied to
Yes.
that habit of or addiction. Like, I'm an alcoholic, I'm a smoker,
Yes.
I'm a drug addict. Like, do not
Yeah.
say I am and then put something negative. I mean, say I'm amazing, I'm really
Yes.
beautiful, I'm really smart. If you put
Yes.
something that has a positive next to it, then fantastic, you're winning. But never, ever something that's of negative nature,
Yeah.
ever.
I'm aware of time, but there's a couple more questions I do want to sneak in if
Absolutely,
you've got
Fiona.
time. So
Absolutely.
the first question would be, often when I'm talking to people about a health experience that they've had, uh, did you, if you think back now to that time before it happened, is there something where, because I know I can describe things that were happening beforehand where I felt like my body was telling me to do something about it. Like I felt like my body was, I think that sometimes your body whispers and it gets a bit louder and gets a bit louder and that screams at you. And ultimately for me, the stroke was it screaming at me. But I can now see back to times where it was talking to
Mhm.
me. Can you recognize any of that in, that 2020 vision looking back, signs or symptoms that your body was trying to tell you that something wasn't right?
So it was not my body, because, like I said, I was in phenomenal shape.
Yes.
I mean, if people could see pictures, even me, I look back sometimes, I'm like, oh my God. And I was so self critical at that time. But
Yes.
I had this feeling of doom that was coming towards me. So it was like
Okay.
an intuition, a
Yeah.
feeling. And I kept
Yeah.
thinking to myself, I'm like, oh my God, because I had so much stress from work, and, my marriage was falling apart, and I had no idea what was going to happen and how I was going to
Mm.
manage. And I'm like, oh my God, I'm probably going to have a heart attack. Like, that's
Yeah.
what I thought would
Geez.
happen.
Wow.
So I knew that
Wow.
something was coming towards me.
Yeah.
I just did not
Mm.
know what it was. But in my head, I'm like, I'm probably, like, if I was to
Yes.
call it, because typically that's what people said, like, oh my God, she's so high strung, she's going to have a heart attack. So I guess I actually knew, I felt intuitively something big was coming and it was going to happen to me.
Yeah. And it was such an overwhelming time if you were dealing with divorce and things like that as well. It's so much going on that sometimes we park things because we're like, I don't know what that is. It doesn't feel good, but oh well, I've got to get on with it. And so we do that anyway. But in particular, that's something that you
Yeah,
did that you
and
would
to be
do.
honest,
Yeah.
it actually defied logic at the time, because just like I said in the beginning when we first started,
Yeah.
beautiful family. I have amazing kids. They're well balanced. They're healthy.
Mm.
Um, we had this huge, gorgeous house. We had cars, motorcycles, really great
Mm.
jobs. We made amazing money. I mean, I
Yeah.
had it made. I had everything that people dreamed. I had the dream life.
Yeah.
Um, and then that happened. So, of course,
Yes.
like where you are up here, if you're not going to have gratitude for everything you have, and you look at things that you're like, well, this, just like I was, I'm like, well, let's get the six pack. Let's run faster. Let's run more.
Mm.
It was never enough.
Mm.
So you
Yeah.
really have to check yourself. I mean, you have to be in such a state of self awareness to kind of really see your blind spots, to be like, I need to stop. I'm good.
Yeah, I think gratitude is a really big part of that. I
Yeah.
think that, if we're not living in gratitude, I think it helps you stay a bit more realistic, a bit more in balance, and just have a bit more perspective. I think when we move out of that, when we're not living in gratitude, it really does. It's not good for us, our emotional or physical health.
Hmm.
Mm. So my last question then would be, and obviously it's a big question, but if, if for those people who are listening or watching, what's kind of, I know there's lots of things, but what's the one piece of advice you would give people to, that things that they could maybe do to hopefully avoid experiencing what you have, or to recover if they have had an experience like that?
As far as the first part of your question is, I highly recommend to people, if you see that you have certain ailments, or like you said, if your body is trying to tell you something, and
Mm,
if you go and you have your blood work done and you see that there are things that are off,
mm,
it's important that you invest in yourself. I mean, you are your biggest investment. I see a lot
mm,
of people invest in things like bigger cars, nicer purses, better
mm,
shoes, bigger houses. Invest in working with someone to educate you and how to really take care of yourself. But
mm,
the first step would be to be in a perfect sense of self awareness, to be able to know what your body's telling you. Don't ignore
mm.
those things. Don't
Yeah.
shut down your body just because you're looking outside of yourself to get cues for
Mm,
what the world says. I mean, Dr. X does not know your, unique biochemistry and what makes you feel good as a person. Are you
mm,
one of those people who needs to sleep 8 hours a day, or do you need maybe 8.5 hours? Because that extra half hour is probably going to let you wake up refreshed. So that's
mm,
important. And the second thing is, what you eat interfaces with every part of your body. I mean, your blood carries the nutrients, so it goes to your brain, it goes to all the body systems, it goes to every organ, to every tissue. And remember, if you want to build a good house or a nice car that runs efficiently and is sound and can withstand, you really have to invest in really good quality material. So if
mm,
you got to have good bricks and good wood and really good concrete for your foundation, or really good quality metal for the car and good parts to make sure the car runs efficiently and that everything is screwed in properly so that your cabinets don't fall down or your tires don't fall while you're driving and then you're going to get into an accident and die. So
mm,
really invest in putting the best things in your body. Your body is the temple. That's where you live
mm.
for the rest of your life. And I think a lot of people don't understand how you are an example to your children. I mean, my kids are healthy because they always saw me investing in health. They always
Yes.
ate well. We've never had any kind of, like, none of us have ever been overweight. None of us have ever been hypertensive. None of us have ever had any health issues of that nature. And
Mm,
ultimately, I think even the doctors relented and said, I think your stroke was because you were just super stressed. I'm like, why
mm.
didn't you tell me this from the beginning? You put me on meds that really took me down the wrong path.
Yes.
So really invest in good quality things that you put in your body and respect yourself enough to actually feed yourself only the good stuff.
Yes. Great advice. Look, thank you so much, Simone, for coming on today. I really appreciate you coming on and sharing your story.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Fiona. It's been a pleasure and an honor to share. And I really appreciate, I actually would love to have you on my show because I would love to hear your story about the stroke, since we have this incredible synchronistic commonality.
Yes, yes, that would be great. A lot of it I can relate to. We're very different personalities, but at the same time, a lot of your story I can absolutely relate to. So
Okay.
I would love to do that. And what's the name of your book? Because you did refer to your book that where you talked
Yes.
about your story. So people who are interested in that, what's the book called?
So my book is very aptly called Against Medical Advice.
Okay,
And it's available on Amazon and all marketplaces, and all various online. I've made it available everywhere. So, yeah, Against
okay.
Medical Advice.
And if people are looking to connect with you, what's the best way to do that?
Yes, absolutely. So I'm very active on Instagram. My handle is at simone.gisondi, or on my website at simonegisondi.com.
Okay. And I will put those links in the show notes as well. So thank you again, Simone.
Thank you, Fiona.
And for those of you listening or watching, thank you so much for joining us today. I hope you got value out of this episode. I know that I did. I always find it interesting hearing people's stories and hearing their strategies and things that they've used to overcome these issues. So thank you for joining us today. Please don't forget to like, subscribe, and share and rate these episodes, and give us any feedback as well. I always appreciate that. So thank you so much, and I'll see you all next week. Thanks. Bye.